Ready to rock?
We're ready to rock.
Welcome everybody to this exciting presentation from Humor That Works. It's entitled Networking for Introverts, a Small Talk on Small Talk. We're very excited to have you here and all of you at home or wherever you are in this virtual classroom setting. We've got some live participants. Make some noise so the people at home know that you're with us. And you can make some noise at home too. You might be alone by yourself. You might be in a public place. We're going to be asking you to interact along with everybody here. So don't feel ashamed. It's going to be fun. Your introvert's going to turn a little extrovert today with the help of our guest speaker, Andrew Tarvin. We've got live streaming cameras, 3 of them in fact. In fact, I like to do a little camera check, kind of late night show host style. So let's do a little camera check. Camera 1. And camera 2. And my personal favorite camera, camera 3. That's the one that's on me the entire time. That's why I love it so much. If you're following along at home, let's take a little look at your computer screen and how you'll be able to interact with us today. You should be seeing the live streaming footage here in this section. There will be some poll questions going on throughout the talk. You'll click on this letter I up here in the upper right-hand corner. That'll drop down, and you'll answer the appropriate poll questions here. Andrew will also just be asking some more open-ended questions. So if you have any comments, any answers to that, or any questions from yourselves, go ahead and keep that chat going. It's already live and very active. This is just a screenshot, so this is not a live stream right here, but you'll be seeing a lot of those questions pop up throughout. Speaking of interaction, we need to get you all warmed up because you specifically are going to be getting up on your feet a bunch for all those amazing people watching at home. So we're going to do a little applause-o-meter. So everybody please put your hands in the clappatory position. And you guys do it at home. Hands in the clappatory position. All right. And on the applause-o-meter, let's get a 0. That was a sound. That was a sound. Zero's no sound. No sound. So everybody, here we go. Ready? A 0. Nice. Let's get a little 1, a little golf clap. There we go. Come on at home. Come on home. A 2, 3. How about a 5? Right, like a Broadway play, and it's like intermission. And, how about a 6, 7? Yeah. Oh. All right. It's like the final number in the Broadway play. We're at an 8. And then let's get it to standing ovation. It's the greatest thing you've ever seen. A 10. Very nice. Very nice. All right. Give yourself a round of applause. Take a seat. You're going to be giving that same standing O to our presenter. We didn't even practice standing O. Andrew's going to be excited for this. So let's give him that 10 after I introduce him. Ladies and gentlemen, the world's first humor engineer, combining his brand of computer science and his background with his experience as a stand-up comedian. He's taught organizations all around the world how to use humor to be more effective at work. He's worked with more than 250 organizations, including Microsoft, the FBI, the International Association of Canine Professionals. That's right, it's a real thing. He is a best-selling author, has been featured in the Wall Street Journal, and his TED Talk on humor has been viewed over 2 million times. His favorite color is orange, and he loves milkshakes. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me in welcoming to the stage Mr. Andrew Tarvin, everybody!
So about 3 years ago, I found myself at the top of Pulpit Rock, or Preikestolen in Norway. And what you can't quite see here is that this is at the edge of a fjord. It drops down like 200, 300 feet. This is a picture of me on the edge, and you can kind of notice off screen I am actually clinging on to the rock for dear life because it was quite high, but obviously a very beautiful view. But the most intimidating part about this experience was not sitting at the edge. It was not the 90-minute hike getting up there. It was not the boat ride on the ferry that we had to take or the car drive that we took to get there or the flight that I took to get to Norway. The most intimidating part of this experience was the networking event that I went to where I met the person who took me on this experience. Guy named Harold in Norway. I was speaking at an event here in New York, and afterwards we were chatting. And as an introvert, chatting with other people is sometimes scarier than being on the edge of a cliff. But it was because of that conversation that I got this really cool experience. And it's because of a lot of the conversations that we have with different people that we do get these interesting experiences. And so what we're going to talk about today is how we can actually be more productive in our way for networking, how we can kind of take it apart and put it back together again, because that's my background. I'm an engineer. And as an engineer, I like taking things apart and putting them back together again. You can do that with things like clocks and radios, but you can also do that with things like networking. And that's what we're going to talk about this afternoon, both for our in-person audience here and then for those of you at home as well. Now, before we jump into the actual content, I do want to learn a little bit about the group that we have both here and at home. So at home, you're going to be filling out a survey that's a scale of introversion. For the people in the room, I do want to kind of get a sense of who we have here. So by quick show of hands, if you had to pick between, say, being a morning person or being a night person, how many of you would say that you're more of a morning person? Okay, a couple of you. If you had to pick between more of a dog person or a cat person, how many would you say you're more of a dog person? Okay, most people. All right. If you were had to pick between, say, iOS, iPhone, or Android, Google, how many would say iOS, iPhone? Most of you? Okay. And finally, I'm more of an Android guy. But finally, if you had to decide between introvert or extrovert, how many of you would say introvert? A few of you. Okay. All right. So we have a little bit of that split here. I would consider myself very much on the introverted side. And that surprises some people because as a speaker, as a presenter, as a comedian, I've done a lot of work. I've been an international humorist. I've worked in 21 different countries around the world on some of these programs. I performed over 1,000 shows as a stand-up comedian, improviser, storyteller. I have taught more than 10,000 people worldwide, and I've worked with a number of organizations. In fact, I've worked with an organization from every letter of the alphabet except for X, Y, and Z. So if you know anyone that works at Xerox, Yahoo, or Zappos, I would love an introduction so I can complete the alphabet. But people are surprised to then find out in my programs that I am, in fact, an introvert. In fact, if you know your personality assessments, I am a type A, blue square, conscientious INTJ with the sign of Aquarius, which means that I am a stubborn, ambitious introvert who likes long walks on the beach by myself. Yeah, Aquarius as well. You know, exactly. You know. But solo, right? We want to do it a little bit on our own. And that's the key, right? Is introversion, extroversion has nothing to do with actual social ability. What I tell my audiences a lot is that I love speaking. I love what I do. I love chatting with people afterwards. But I'm also going to be very happy when I don't have to see any of you later, right? I want to be able to recharge on my own. So if we're going to talk a little bit about introversion and networking specifically for introverts, probably helpful to have an understanding of the difference between being an introvert and being an extrovert, because there are some misconceptions around introversion and extroversion. Because it has nothing to do with social ability. One, it's more about how you think and how you recharge. So extroverts, they tend to think out loud. You ask them a question, they'll start talking, continue talking, and then be like, oh, long story short, boom, this is kind of what I was thinking. Most introverts don't say long story short. Our point is like, well, why say even the story before the long story short part? Why not just say that thing that you thought of? And it's because extroverts are thinking out loud. The other thing is that introverts tend to think on their own. So if you ask an introvert a question, sometimes they'll be quiet for a little bit and then give a response. And while they're quiet, extroverts are like, wait, did I break the introvert? What's going on? Why aren't they responding? But it's just because they're thinking more to themselves. The second reason, the second way that defines kind of introversion, extroversion is how you recharge. Extroverts tend to recharge by being in front of other people, by getting together in a group that gives them energy. Whereas introverts tend to recharge by being on their own when they're reading a book or kind of going for a walk or playing a video game or whatever it is. They're recharging more in their own. And it is not binary. It's a little bit of a scale. In fact, actually, we have that question for the audience at home. We have the poll question of where do you rank on the scale, and I would love to see if we've started to get some responses.
You know, Drew, it's a tight battle so far.
Yeah.
It's about 50-50 extrovert, introvert, and there actually is a couple votes for ambivert as well. So
that's right, because we have on the scale we have very introverted, very extroverted, and then also people who identify more in the middle as an ambivert. So the real key, I think, is whether you're an introvert, extrovert, or ambivert, the key is to remember that we're all apparently verts. Don't know what that is, but we're all verts in some way, right? But it is some type of spectrum. Some people like they might even oscillate in some ways. right? But whether you're an introvert or an extrovert has nothing to do with social ability. So why is there this stereotype that introverts are more socially awkward? And I think it's because if you think about it, if as a person, if you recharge by being in front of other people, then you're going to be in front of other people a lot. In school, you're going to hang out with friends a lot of times. You may even hang out with your parents' friends when they come over and you want to be out and getting energy from all of these other people. If you're an introvert and you recharge by being on your own, you're going to spend more time on your own. So maybe at recess, instead of going and playing sports with other people, maybe you're reading a book or you're working on some type of project. And so what happens is that by the time that people graduate, they go into the workforce or get a little bit older, the sheer number of conversations that an introvert has had is a lot lower than the conversations that an extrovert has. Right? So it's nothing to do with social ability. A lot of times it's around social practice. And so that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. What are some of the practices? What if we take apart networking to understand it a little bit better, put it back together so that we can practice it, so that we become more effective in that role? That's what we're going to talk about today. To start, though, I want to do a quick exercise because just like any skill, you get better through networking by practice and repetition. And so those of you at home can follow along as well, but for those of you in the room, everyone please stand up. Great, and I'm going to mirror this for you. So I'll stand here in the middle so that they can see me at home as well. I'm going to mirror this for you. On your left hand, point forward. Like that. Great. And on your right hand, give a thumbs up. Perfect. Now just switch the two. And you can switch back and forth. Back and you want to have a gun? Some of you have guns, right? Don't have a gun. It's just a thumb up, finger out, and you're just switching back and forth. If it's a little bit of a challenge, sometimes doing one hand at a time can help. Or like weirdly like punching through it, the Nordic Trek approach sometimes works. All right, so you guys can go ahead and have a seat. Those of you at home, you're more than welcome to continue to try that. But I like that as a simple warm-up. It's warming up the left and right side of the body, so warming up the left and right side of the brain. But it's also a great demonstration of something called the conscious competence learning model, or the 4 stages of competence, which says that whenever we learn a new skill, we go through 4 phases. The first phase is non-conscious incompetence, right? You are unaware that you can't do something. So if I came up to you on the street and was like, hey, do you think you could do this? First of all, you'd be like, why is this weirdo approaching me like that? Right? But second of all, you'd be like, probably seems to be pretty easy, right? So you're non-consciously incompetent, unaware that you can't do something. So then you try it out and you realize it's a little bit harder than expected, and you become consciously incompetent. Right? You are now aware that there's something that you cannot do. And that's actually an okay spot to be in because you at least recognize that there's a gap between where you are and where you want to be. So then you take a workshop, you do a live training, or you spend an entire weekend on this. Right? Really about 5 minutes. It takes about 5 minutes of concerted effort. And you get to the point that you're consciously competent. When you really think about it, you're able to do it. And then finally, with more practice and repetition, don't even have to think about what it is that you're doing. You become non-consciously competent. And this is true for any new skill that you learn. It's true when you're first learning how to walk. It's true when you're learning a new language. And it's true when you're learning something like networking or humor or improv, whatever it is. It takes time for us to actually get that skill. So it just becomes practice and repetition. So we're going to work on some of that practice piece today. So if we're talking about conversation, if we're talking about small talk, probably important to understand why conversation matters. Because maybe this is a dumb question, but I'm an engineer. I'm an introvert. And so I was like, do I actually really have to learn how to talk to other people? Could I be successful without doing it? And it turns out you can't. And because 70% of jobs are found through networking. It's through the connections that you have with other people. And as a result, you need to be able to have those conversations. I'm curious, so there's another poll question that we have. So we're going to go to the next poll question for the audience is, how many people have actually found a job through networking? So they're going to answer that online. But I'm curious for those of you in the room, by show of hands, how many of you have gotten some type of job or opportunity because of a networking experience or because of someone that you knew? Show of hands. Yeah, pretty much each of you, right? Some type of opportunity has come because of the connections that you have. Right? It's not just your resume or your experience. It's not just a job application online. A lot of times it's the human connection, the reason why we have some of these opportunities. So it's important for us to think about that. 70% of jobs come from networking. Because you guys have probably heard the phrase, it's not what you know, but who you know. Right? And that's close, but actually even more accurate than that is It's not only what you know or who you know, it's who knows you and who knows what you can do. Particularly for job opportunities, because if you are, say, a rock star computer programmer and you're like brother's cousin, actually that doesn't make sense, that would also be your own cousin. If your brother's friend works at a startup that is in need of programmers, if they don't know that you are a programmer, then it doesn't actually help you to have that connection, right? So it's not only who you know, but it's who knows what you can do or what you're interested in. So that's one value to networking. What do we get? Do we get a response from the people online as to
They
whether or
are
not?
slowly coming through in terms of that particular question, in terms of yes. Most of them are putting yeses in. Sergio actually mentioned when we asked about what he was here particularly for the course, about how to introduce himself with impact.
Oh,
So
okay,
how to use that networking kind of environment,
Absolutely.
to show what he's about.
Yeah, and that's a great point. That's a great question that I am curious about. So this is a great time to pause, so other people can kind of answer that question if they are. So I'm curious, for those of you here and also at home, what do you hope to get out of this conversation? We prompted that question kind of earlier on. But what could you learn from? What could you benefit from knowing about networking that would make you more effective as a networker? Some of those are going to come in, but I'm curious from anyone here in the live audience, what could you learn from?
I think just initiating small talk would be just to get past that. How do you start a conversation?
Okay, yeah, so how do you start a conversation, for sure. So we'll talk about that. Any other things that could kind of potentially help?
Social skills.
Social skills?
Yeah, so to know how to interact with people you don't know.
Okay.
And what to talk about and what not to talk about.
Yeah, so
when people
topics.
say that's too much information. So, what topics you bring
Yeah,
up.
so getting to the point that you're sharing enough, but also not like, okay, that's kind of weird TMI type situation. Yep, yeah, okay, so what to talk about? Anything else?
How to follow up on if you go to an event and then after the event everybody just kind of goes home.
Yeah.
How to follow up on
How to build that relationship longer term, so it's not just that one time thing, and actually follow up so that they actually respond to you. I think that's a great point. Yeah, you gonna add something?
Stepping out of my comfort zone and learning how to be social as opposed to speaking when spoken to.
Okay, yeah, being a little bit more proactive about that process, for sure. So we'll cover kind of a lot of those ideas. Anything else from the
Not in terms of
virtual
questions,
groups?
but it is interesting. There are a couple no's coming through about people that don't feel like they've gotten a job from networking. So then obviously are hoping for this to be their kind of jumping off point.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, if you haven't found a job through networking, then maybe this is an opportunity to be able to learn a little bit more. Excellent. So a big key to that is, again, knowing people, but not only them knowing you, but knowing what you're capable of, what you're looking for, right? Another reason why networking is incredibly important is because it can help us actually be more productive. We can learn from people through conversation. In fact, a study that was published in the Harvard Business Review found that when they increased the amount of conversation that employees had, their productivity increased by 8%, because they started to see and learn from each other the different shortcuts or the tools or the things that work. I remember going to a networking event a few years ago, and I was holding my drink in my right hand, taking a drink from it, and I was talking with someone, and he was like, hey, just by the way, here's a quick tip that I've picked up, is when you're at a networking event, hold your drink in your left hand. That way, when you meet people, you can easily shake their hand with the right hand, and also your hand isn't wet or sweaty from the drink, right? Which makes a lot of sense. It's much better, you don't want to have that weird kind of clammy fish hand or anything like that as you're meeting people. So he's like, just always keep your drink in your left hand. That was a tip that I learned through conversation, right? So networking can help us to be more productive and more effective in our role. And finally, networking is also how we build relationships, right? And people with 3 close friends at work are 96% more likely to be satisfied in their lives. Not just satisfied at work, but satisfied in their lives because they have a support group at that organization. And you build relationships through conversation, sometimes through networking and through things like small talk. So, for example, my mom, who is watching today, I believe, is here. She
is live right now.
She is live.
Confirmed.
All right, excellent. So my mom is here. She said she was going to be here, which is pretty exciting. But this is a picture of her and her friend. She didn't know that she was going to be in this presentation. So she's just as surprised as you are to see a picture of her and all of her friends. But she's had these same friends for 50 years. They're all high school friends. Do you think they remembered what they first talked about? Do you think that first conversation that like one of them's like, yeah, I would totally be friends with Drew's mom, but the first time we talked, she asked me about the weather? Right? No, like most people, once you get past the initial phases of a relationship, it doesn't matter if your first conversation was more of the small talk type conversation. It was just a starting point, right? Just a way to start to build that relationship. And everyone understands it, everyone goes through it. So a lot of times we're worried about the awkwardness of it, but everyone's awkward, right? Plus we have some tips that can help you to be a little bit less awkward about that process. So shout out again to my mom for her picture. So the question is, if conversation is so important, why does it make us cringe? Why do we hesitate or dislike the idea of networking? So that's a question I would love for the people online to answer. So what is it about networking events? But also here in the room, what is it about like a networking event that makes us cringe, that we don't like it? What are the stereotypes?
As you just mentioned, the awkwardness of it all.
Yeah, right? There's a certain awkwardness to this conversation for some reason. Maybe because you don't know what to talk about or there's a weird pause or that kind of thing. So the awkwardness. What else? Yeah.
I would say when it feels like artificial, like not like a genuine interaction.
Yeah, you go to like a networking event, you feel like everyone's there because they want something, right? It doesn't feel genuine at all. It's just about, we're all here in this room because we're supposed to, so I'm going to give my business cards away as much as possible. Hopefully you will buy something from me, or you will give me something that I want, right? Any responses coming in from online?
Muslim, actually, small talk from Shelby, for sure, like kind of having those conversations and what they could be.
Yeah.
Muslim also just has a comment that Aquariuses are actually closer to extroverts because it's an air sign. So.
Okay, all right, so we're getting some commentary on my personality assessment.
Yeah,
they're
really locked in on that one item. Yeah.
I like it. We like water. I don't know what if he wants to give me my horoscope for today too, he can.
All right, Muslim, if you got any advice for Drew, go for it. But another making small talk. That seems to be sort of the common thing.
Yeah, it's that small talk. And the idea of like, even the phrase small talk, it's small. It's seemingly not very important. It's not relevant, right? We don't care. So there tends to be kind of three reasons. We've talked about them. So one is that, networking feels awkward, right? The random situation of everyone standing around, you don't know what to talk about, what do you say, can feel very, very awkward. And so the way that we can get around that is having a strategy, right? We can change it from being awkward to being a little bit more enjoyable if we have a strategy going into it, if we're a little bit more focused around it. And that's what we're going to talk about next. It can also seem boring, right? It's like you have the same conversation with 50 people at one event. So it can seem very boring where you're asking the same standard questions and always giving the same standard answers. So one way that we can change that is being a little bit more proactive about having fun. Because that's part of it, is like you are part of the process of networking, right? You're part of you're one of the people having the conversation. So that means you can control that conversation a little bit more. You can find ways to make it more fun for yourself. And then finally, people say that it's also selfish, right? Like you said, it feels artificial. Everyone wants something from someone else. And so we can change that by making sure that we put the focus on someone else, that we really kind of emphasize what they want or what we can provide to them. So I'm curious, who here knows what a microwave oven is? Okay, right? Cool. Can you come up here?
Sure, definitely.
Yeah, if you can stand right here. And I would love for you to explain to me what a microwave oven is, with the caveat being that I'm going to be a cave person. Okay, so it's imagine I'm a caveman. I've been transported from whenever cave people existed to here. We have a microwave kind of in front of us, and I want to know what this microwave thing is. So what is microwave oven?
Warms your food.
Ooh, food. Yeah,
Makes
warm.
food hot.
Makes food hot. Ooh, why use microwave?
Saves time.
Ah, so fast.
Yes.
Makes food hot fast.
Makes food hot.
Okay,
fast.
what is it?
A box.
What is a box?
something with 6 sides? 8
Six-
sides? I need help from the audience. A box has four sides.
6 sides. So box. Okay, so this kind of like
With a
rock.
door.
Ooh, rock. It's like a rock.
No. Similar in shape, but different operations.
Okay.
Rocks kind of, you can use rocks for a number of things except heating your food and saving
Okay.
time.
Okay. So kind of like small cave.
No.
No.
More like compressed fire.
Ooh, fire, yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
fire
no,
in a box.
Fire in a box. Okay,
Makes
fire.
food hot very fast.
All right. Make food hot.
Stuck in a
Okay.
light bulb, they stuck it in your hand and heat it up.
The light bulb to heat it up? All right, excellent. We're gonna use the light bulb. Give him a round of applause. Yeah, give him a round of applause. Cool, so, so kind of challenging, right? Something relatively simple as a microwave oven to try to explain it in a way that a cave person would understand, a little bit of a challenge. What was your strategy for kind of trying to explain it?
Recalling on my memories of a microwave oven, using one, the first time that I've used one, the most recent time that I've used one, and how it's convenient for me.
Yeah, so thinking of the memory and what it is, right? What else? Did you guys notice anything else kind of in the room, what he was, like how he was trying to explain it?
Yeah, he made it into short syllables, like very easy to, like the sentences were like 3 words long max.
Yeah, so they were shortened words. He was speaking like Kevin from The Office in that one episode, right, where he just shortened the words, right? So keeping it short, simplifying it a little bit, and starting to kind of connect it. So it was like warms food up like a fire, right? It's like compressed fire, right? So if we think about effective communication, it kind of comes down to 2 things. The first is relevance, right? If we want to get someone to pay attention to us, we have to tell them why they should care. Not why we care, but why they should care. So like a microwave oven to a cave person is kind of like, hey, remember last week when you ate that woolly mammoth meat and then half of your family died? Remember that tragedy? Well, you have to cook food before you eat it so that you don't get sick. Well, you know how that takes a really long time with a fire? Well, a microwave oven cooks food fast, right? So this is why I care about it as a cave person. The second piece to effective communication is that it is relatable. Right? We relate things in terms that the other person can understand. So it's kind of like whether it's a cave or a rock or it's a box, right? And it's like fire. Do any of you guys know what a euphonium is? Euphonium. So I could say a euphonium is a series of brass alloys bent into various shapes. It has valves on it you blow into and it makes noise. Or I could say that it's like a small tuba. Right? And if you know what a tuba is, you instantly understand, at least at a high level, what a euphonium is. Because I've related it to something you already know, right? That's how we learn new things. So effective communication is relevant and relatable to the other person. And so if we want to have networking conversations that aren't selfish, that are more giving, that build strong relationships so that we can follow up with people afterwards, we want to make sure that we talk about things that are relevant and relatable to them, right? It's about mostly focusing on that other person. That's how we improve the networking experience. Okay? So how do you actually have a conversation, right? How do you know what to talk about? What do you say? How do you get into it is what we're going to talk about next. And as an engineer, I like creating processes, right? I have, we're going to talk about a 3-step process for networking. I have a 5-step process for problem solving. I have a 7-step process for efficiently loading and unloading a dishwasher. Which for New Yorkers may be less relevant, but for those of you at home, you might actually have dishwashers, which we don't have here. But for at home, if you really want to know the key, the real key to it is putting all the silverware together when you are loading the dishwasher. It'll save about 20 seconds on the unload. But more importantly than that, we're going to talk about a 3-step process to having a conversation that you can have with anyone. And the 3 steps are to ask compelling questions, tell interesting stories, and continue the conversation. So we're going to talk about each one of those in a little bit of a deeper dive. So the first one is to ask compelling questions. If you read Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, say that the key to being a good conversationalist is to get the other person talking and then just listen, right? Encourage the other person to talk and then listen. That's simply how we do it. The problem is that most of the time, if you have the same boring questions, you're going to get the same boring answers, right? And then you're not really having a conversation so much as having a dress rehearsal for something that you've already practiced. And so one of the ways that we can do that is we can ask compelling questions. We can change the type of questions that we're asking to make them a little bit more interesting. Because I'm curious, I'd be curious, what kind of questions do you normally hear at a networking event or in small talk? So for those of you at home, certainly type in what those common questions are. But from those in the room, what kind of questions do you normally hear at like a networking event? Yeah.
Well, in most events, if people aren't wearing name tags, the first initial question is, what's your name? Well, you introduce yourself and you ask someone else what their name is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it's, hi, I'm Andrew. What's your name? What brings you here, right? Yes, so certainly the name. What other question might you hear?
What do you do for a living?
Yeah, right? What do you do is a very common one, right? Especially at a networking event, it's almost always going to be after the name, it's going to be, and what do you do? Right? What else? What else might you hear?
Where are you from?
Where are you from? Yep. Yeah, so where are you coming in from? Do we have any questions from the virtual audience?
You know, Andrew, I set the at-home audience to the next level. They're working on some compelling questions.
Oh, okay.
But then I've thrown the standard at them, so they're
So they're thinking of that, but I like that. You're
Yeah.
already asking them, yeah, how can we make some of these questions more compelling, right? So if we think about these standard questions, we can just tweak them a little bit to make them a little bit more interesting. So for example, we can take the question, what do you do? Right? So if someone asks me the question, what do you do? I can say, oh, I'm a speaker, or I'm a comedian. It's very short, can be concise, but it doesn't really say much. Instead, we could ask a question like, what's the coolest thing you've worked on in the last 3 months? In the process, you're probably going to learn what that person does, but it gives them an opportunity to tell a little bit more of a story, to talk about something a little bit cooler. So, for example, the last 3 months, I was just recently in Germany for the first time, speaking on humor in the workplace in Germany, which was fantastic because I learned that Germans do, in fact, have a sense of humor, which was great. But I went to Berlin, I went to Munich, I got a chance to go to Prague while I was there as well. And so that gives me a whole other area that I can start to talk about that's more interesting than just saying, oh, I do blank, right? It can be the same process for helping set someone else up, right? Rather than just be, what do you do, and them answering, what's the coolest thing you've worked on, they're now going to talk about something that's a little bit more interesting that they're more passionate about. We can ask the question, instead of where are you from, if you ask me where I'm from, I'll say Cincinnati, Ohio. It's where I grew up. But it might stop there. Instead, if you ask, what's the best thing about your hometown? Best thing about Cincinnati, Ohio is Graeter's ice cream. Best ice cream on the planet, specifically black raspberry chip, is one of the best things you can put in your mouth. It's amazing ice cream, right? Get more passionate, become more interesting in terms of the conversation that we're having. And then finally, you can think of, like a lot of times at events, you'll ask things like, what do you think of the speaker? People ask, what do you think of the speaker? Sometimes people are like, oh, he kind of looked like a skinny Hugh Jackman. Skinny Hugh Jackman. Sometimes I sometimes get Hugh Jackman mixed with Conan O'Brien, which I'll take. I did an event not too long ago, and a woman came up to me afterwards, and she's like, I think you look like Justin Timberlake, but from here to here. Just the eyeballs. All right, which I'll take. All positive things, I'll take those, right? So instead of what do you think of the speaker, you might ask, what's one thing that you learned today, or what's one thing that you want to take away, right? This gets them talking a little bit more, and it's not just a single answer, short answer, right? It gets them talking a little bit more and helps you to build that relationship a little bit better. So we can ask compelling questions. Now, one of the keys when asking a compelling question, though, is that you actually have to listen. So one quick aside. So for a resource, one thing that you can do is we've written a post called 50 Questions to Get to Know Someone, which is just a whole list of different questions that you can ask that are a little bit more interesting than what do you do. Right? It gives you a starting point that you can just kind of take with you as in your back pocket. If you're in a networking event, don't know what to say, just be like, all right, I'm going to ask one of these questions or two of these questions that I really like. But the key is, once you ask a compelling question, you actually have to listen. Right? And you don't want to listen autobiographically. You want to listen more to really kind of truly understand what this person is talking about. So can I get 2 volunteers? 2 people willing to jump up? Great. Yeah, 2 of you. So you're going to stand right here. Excellent. And what's your name?
Dan.
Dan and Fred. All right, excellent. So Dan and Fred, you're going to have a conversation. You're going to have a conversation about something else that's going to go on that you're going to do this weekend. So Dan, you're going to start. And you're just going to share something that you're kind of up to this weekend aside from this program. Okay. Fred, you are going to respond to his statement in a normal conversation, except for your response has to begin with the last letter of the last word that was just said. Okay, does that make sense? So for example, if I was doing this exercise, I would say, a little bit later, I'm going to go to an improv show. All right. The other person would respond, but the response would have to begin with the letter W, right? Because that ends in show, ends in W. So the response had to begin with the letter W. So they might say, wow, is it going to be really good? Right? And you're going to go back and forth. Once you start, each new line starting with the last letter of the last word that was just said. So if they said, wow, is it going to be really good? I would say something like, duh, I'm going to go see Comedy Sports. They're always amazing. Right? You're just going back and forth, each new line starting with the last letter of the last word that was just said. So you're going to start us off, and you're just going to go back and forth. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right, excellent. Go ahead and begin.
I'm going to watch some college football later.
Right on. Sounds like it's going to be fun. Who's playing? Playing.
Guess it would be Notre Dame and Syracuse.
Ew. Syracuse. You ever been to Syracuse before?
Yeah. Every time I visit my brother up at school, I go to Syracuse.
Hey.
All right, excellent. We'll stop right there. That's excellent. Give him a round of applause. Nicely done. You can go and have a seat. I like that. So, how was the exercise? Easy, hard, fun, dumb? All of the above?
Tough.
Kind of tough?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I just felt like I was just waiting for. I don't think I was listening to what he was saying at the beginning. Just kind of waiting for that last letter.
Yeah, so it changed how you were listening, right? So yeah, and that's a good question. So what, and you guys can kind of think about this as well at home, what differences did you notice between, say, this conversation and normal conversation, right? What differences did you notice? So one difference is that it changed what you were listening to, right? You're listening more for what's that, was that the last word? Was that the last word? Was that the last word? All right, and then what's that letter? What other differences did you notice? Either you two experiencing it or for the people watching it?
It wasn't like a traditional format for a conversation. It kind of jumps from topic to topic because it kind of had to. There wasn't like a linear sort of.
Yeah, it wasn't as linear, right? It was a little bit more stilted. You probably had to come up with like different words. You're like right on, right? Saying a different kind of set, maybe that you wouldn't normally say. Yeah, it was a little bit more jilted. From other people, did you notice any other differences?
Be spontaneous and say what you really wanted.
Yeah, you couldn't quite say exactly what you wanted. You were like
Wait for
forced
the
a little
last-
bit. Yeah,
you couldn't
absolutely.
respond the way you really wanted to. So
Yeah, right. So it changes it a little bit. So what's interesting though is so we did this exercise with a group of marketing managers at ESPN, and when we asked that question of how is this conversation different than normal conversation, the senior most person in the room said, "Oh, well, you actually had to listen." It's like that's different than normal conversation.
We also they had to actually think.
Yeah, and they had to think. You had to actually think before you responded, right? Because so often in normal conversation, we are listening to respond, right? Someone starts talking, we get a sense of what they're talking about, and then we start to formulate a response in our head while they're still talking.
sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes, right? And then we're just waiting for them to shut up so that we can drop knowledge on them. Right? It's like if you stop talking, we'll tell you everything that you need to know. That is very different than listening to understand, or as Covey calls it, seek first to understand, then to be understood, one of the 7 habits of highly effective people. Right? Now, this exercise isn't to say this is how you should listen, right? Because it does change what you're listening to. It's simply to kind of turn on the lights to say we're normally trying to create a response while the other person is talking, instead of really listening to understand what they are saying. Now, I will say if you are bored at a networking event, you can do this exercise with the other person. You don't even have to tell them you're doing it. Just start responding with whatever that last letter is, and it will make the conversation a little bit more entertaining for yourself. So that's one thing to do. But it's really about making sure that we listen to understand if we're going to be asking these compelling questions, because that's how people feel like they've made a connection, is when they feel like they've truly been understood. So that's step number 1, is to ask compelling questions. Step number 2 is to tell interesting stories. So if someone asks you a question, you don't want to just turn it back around on them. So if they're like, why did you start Humor That Works? You don't want to be like, why did you start Humor That Works? Doesn't make any sense. Right? So if someone asks you a question, you want to actually give a response. You don't want it to just feel like an interview or 20 questions that the other person is saying. So you want to make sure that you actually tell a story. Make it a little bit more interesting. So rather, when someone says, what do you do? Rather than just giving the short answer of it, you can tell an entire story. You can tell a little bit of a story. Not a super long story, not like 20 minutes. Well, I was born on a Tuesday. It's a little rainy outside for a February day, but like you don't want to start all the way back there, but you might give a little bit of background. Oh, what do you do? Oh, well, as an engineer, I've always been obsessed with efficiency. So I got a degree in computer science and engineering. And then I went to Ohio State and started working at Procter & Gamble after I left. And at P&G, I realized that there's a difference between being efficient and being effective. And I didn't really have the skills I needed to be effective, but I had started doing improv and stand-up comedy and realized the same skills you need to be effective as an improviser are some of the same skills you need to be effective as a communicator. So I started incorporating humor into the workplace, et cetera, right? So now I've just told a story, and through that story, we can make connections. Right? Me mentioning, oh, I went to Ohio State. If it's a fellow Ohio State person, we make an instant connection. right? If I talk about comedy, oh, I do stand-up comedy. Oh, I love stand-up comedy. Who's your favorite comedian, right? We can talk about that. Sometimes when I meet people, they find out that, if they find out that I'm from Ohio, we have that instant connection, we talk about it. Find I do comedy, we have an instant connection, we talk about it. If I meet someone, they're a fellow introvert, we don't always talk about it, but we make eye contact, right? Right? But we connect with people when we have these shared experiences, these shared moments, and that can come from telling these stories. And the stories that we can tell, there's a few of them that we want to kind of know. And this comes from the idea of Made to Stick. So Made to Stick is a great book by Dan and Chip Heath about stories or ideas that stand the test of time. And they found that stories, or facts told in story form, are more than 20 times more likely to be remembered than facts told in bullet point form. Because we can remember that story. And that's how we stay memorable to the people that we talk to. Rather than just, here's my resume and what I've done. Oh, I remember that person. He's the one that had that story about X, Y, or Z, right? It helps us to better connect with people. When we think about stories, when we think about kind of like cultural stories, we think mostly about beginning, middle, and end. In the business context, it's simply context, action, results is the structure for a very simple story. Well, as the context of the situation, what action did you take, and then what were the results of that action? So it becomes pretty simple to start to create, okay, yeah, what's the story? What's the context, action, results of the story of you, right? So what's the story you can tell when someone asks the question, what do you do? It's one story to know. Another story to know is the story of your work, right? The background of your work, what you head into, what type of work you actually do day to day, the projects you're working on. And then also you want to know the story of your future. As you're talking with people, where do you want to go? What's the story of what you are hoping to achieve? And that's going to really help to set the stage of finding those connections that can help you ultimately achieve it by telling an interesting story in that way. And as you think about kind of that structure, context, action, results, some things to think about. Can I get 2 more volunteers? 2 more people willing to jump up? And 1 moving. Come back up. Excellent. Great. And so what's your name?
Tracy.
Tracy and
Ali.
Ali? Great. Tracy and Ali, what's going to happen is, Ali, you're going to tell a story. You're going to tell the story of answering a question of what do you do. All right? And Tracy, what you're going to do is you're going to help direct this story. And the way that you're going to direct this is you're going to have 2 motions. One of 2 motions you're going to use. There's this motion, which means continue on with the plot. Okay? So if he's going like this, so then that means you're just going to tell kind of the plot of the details. So if I was telling a story, it's like, so I've always been an engineer. I went to the Ohio State University, right? At any point, Tracy, you can switch to this motion, which means tell me more. Color in more detail about the thing that you just said. In fact, you can even say, tell me more about blank, right? So if I'm saying, I went to, so I've always been an engineer, went to the Ohio State University. Oh, tell me more about Ohio State. Oh, well, it's a campus in Columbus, Ohio. There's 50,000 people. They were the first true national champions because they won the first college football playoffs, whatever it is, right? Then at any point, you can go back to this, which means tell me more of that plot, right? So go back to plot. So basically, this is continue on with the story, the plot. This is tell me more detail.
Hand motions only, no words.
Hand motions, you can also say tell me more about blank. You can use your words for that if you would like. You're just reacting to it as you're telling this story, giving those details. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Understand?
Right.
Excellent. So we'll go ahead and begin.
Just talking about what I do.
Yeah, what you do. Telling a story, a little bit more of the story about what you do.
So what do you do?
I am a software developer.
Tell me some more.
I used to work at IBM, basically code, kind of like the talk, the person giving the talk.
Okay.
And a lot of sitting around in a cubicle and typing away, just looking at the screen.
Okay.
Not a lot of interactions like this with other people, but just me and the keyboard. Pretty much.
Tell me some more about you and your cubicle.
The cubicle was typical, as I was lucky I had a high wall to cubicle. The wall kind of went up to here, which is kind of new technology at the time. No one could peek over the wall. I had little figurines, action figures on my cubicle, like a typical nerd.
Tell me more about your figurines.
I was really into Batman. A lot of Batman stuff.
All right, excellent. Yeah, so we'll stop right there. That's great. To start, we'll start. I want to ask you both of you about the exercise a little bit. How did you like it as a listener? Did you like having control, not like having control?
I enjoyed it.
Enjoyed it?
I enjoyed
And
it.
what made you decide between either continue on or tell me more? What made you decide to switch between one or the other?
Certain topics that he discussed, not to say that they're all boring, but some were more interesting than others, and I wanted to know a little bit more.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So something that piqued your curiosity. It was like, okay, tell me a little bit more about it, right? For sure. And for you, how was the experience being directed? Did you like it? Not like it?
No, I did not like that at all.
Yeah. And why is that?
It gave me the feeling like I was under pressure that I had to come up with something interesting to say.
Yeah.
Instead of things that I want, the typical way I would describe my work.
Right, yeah. So there's a certain process or a certain conversation that you might have of describing your work, and then now suddenly they're like, I wasn't going to say any more about your cubicle, and now suddenly you have to describe the cubicle and its height and everything. That's not something you would normally go into detail about, right? So it changed a little bit, right? Cool, excellent. You guys can have a seat. Give them a round of applause. Yeah, so I think it's an interesting exercise as we think about that story. But the interesting thing about stories is that they're very, very valuable because they are both relevant and relatable, depending on how we tell them, right? The plot of a story that we're using to answer a question is the relevance. This is why I'm telling you this is story, this is the plot, this is the detail, this is why it's important, right? The additional detail, the coloring in of those details becomes the relatability. This is why it's relatable, by adding things of like cubicle, or we start to talk about the figurines in Batman. Oh, maybe I don't know anything about engineering or cubicle life, but I do know Batman, and let's talk about it, right? Let's talk about how terrible like Suicide Squad was and the Joker in that versus the Joker in the Dark Knight series. Or let's talk about Christian Bale and his far too deep of a voice when that was weird, right? So it gives you something different to be able to speak about. So it's relevant and relatable. Do you guys think we get this type of feedback day to day?
Not,
people?
Not with the hand motions, more with body language.
Yeah, right? So we get it, but not this obvious. But facial expressions, and sometimes we even get the kind of like, okay, wrap it up, right?
Sometimes the face tell more than the verbally. I can tell what someone's thinking sometimes.
Exactly, right?
And the facial expression.
Through the body language, we can get an understanding of people are interested or not, right? So if I'm at a networking event, and maybe I'm just meeting someone for the first time and like kind of closed off a little bit, not fully engaged in the conversation. And then if someone mentions milkshakes, I'll be like, what? Milkshakes? Like, I love milkshakes, right? So that my body language has basically said, tell me more. Same thing if we're talking about someone and maybe a conversation, a topic comes up that they're not interested in, maybe they were open and now they've kind of closed off a little bit, right? So we get feedback day to day that we want to make sure that we're reacting to. But we want to share enough details and information so that we can kind of make that connection. And sometimes in a story, maybe it's not a detail that we spend a lot of time on usually, but in this particular interaction, maybe that person's really interested in it, so we go into it. So when we're telling our stories, we want to make sure that we're not too kind of set on the script of that story, but instead kind of telling it in a more conversational way. So the last step is to then continue the conversation, right? To actually build on the conversation both in the moment and afterwards. How do you actually make that connection? So I want to do one more exercise. So can I get 4 of you up? 4 people up? It's pretty easy. Yeah, we got 2 more. 2 more? You want to join? Yeah, it'll be easy. It'll be great. Come join us. Excellent. So you can stand, yeah, right there. Excellent. So what you guys are going to do is you're going to say you've had such a fun time here meeting all of these fascinating people that you want to get together for some type of future event. The 4 of you together, or all of us together, in fact. So collectively as a group, you're going to kind of brainstorm this activity of something that we should do. So Dan is going to start. He's going to share an idea, and then you're going to go down the line, but each time you go down the line, you're going to start your sentence with yes, but. All right, so for example, we might say, okay, I think as an entire group, we should go to Shake Shack. Right? Love Shake Shack. They have amazing milkshakes along with great burgers, right? So the next person would say, yes, but, and they might say something like, yes, but we might have some vegetarians in the group, right? Next line, yes, but they have a great portobello mushroom burger there. Yes, but what if they're a vegetarian but don't like mushrooms? Yes, but like, is that allowed? I don't know. That seems like it removes a lot of food that a vegetarian can eat. I don't know. I'm not a vegetarian, right? So you're just going to go down the line, each new line starting yes, but. Does that make sense? And you might go through a couple of times. We'll see. All right, so Dan, you're going to start us off with an idea.
All right, guys, I think we should go bowling. Yes, but what if some of us might not know how to bowl?
Yes, but how about pool instead?
Yes, but what if you don't know how to shoot pool? Not everybody can put the ball in the hole.
Yes, but I also don't like pool halls. I feel like sketchy people hang out there.
Yes, but those sketchy people could be interesting.
Yes, but sketchy people are sketchy.
All right, excellent. So stop right there. Cool. How did they do with the exercise, right? They're able to follow the instructions. Great, right? How was the idea? Do we have an idea? We don't quite have an idea, right? Yeah, okay, cool. So you're going to do the same thing. We'll start back here with you, Dan. Again, you're going to start us off. But this time, each time, instead of saying yes, but, you're going to say yes, and. Right? So we're changing one word, but, to and. All right, so you're just going to build off. So that initial idea, like we started, would be like, we should all go to Shake Shack. Yes, and we'll all get burgers, fries, and shakes. Yes, and, right, etc. Boom, 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 all the way down. So go ahead and begin.
Guys, I think we should ride a hot air balloon.
Yes, and we should take pictures while we're up there.
Yes, and maybe we should go to Turkey for that.
Yes, and then go to Dubai afterwards.
Yes, and I think we should bring some alcohol.
Yes, and we should make sure we have a lot of it.
Yes, and if we're going to Turkey, we probably need a lawyer.
Yes, and bring Moet. I like bubbles.
Yes, and maybe some food also.
All right, excellent. Yeah, we'll stop right there. How did they do that time following instruction?
Great.
Great, right? How do we have? How do we feel about the idea?
I like it.
Yeah, right. A good, much more generated idea. You guys can go have a seat. Give them a round of applause. Nicely done. A round of applause for yourself. Cool. So for those of you that did the exercise, how many of you thought that yes and was easier? Okay. How many people thought yes but? No? Cool. And so this next question, you can also start to think about this for our audience at home as well, is what differences did you notice between yes and yes but? So for you up front, what differences did you notice for yourself between the yes and the yes but?
So the yes and was more of agreeing and more feeding off of the person, as opposed to the yes but was the kind of confrontation and denying what they were saying and offering a new idea.
Yeah, so yes but was more confrontational, yes and was more about agreement. Cool. Any other differences?
Yes, but you kind of under pressure to come up with a better idea. So you're like, oh, what's a better idea? But yes and is like you're just adding something that something could be less important, no problem.
Yeah, right. So it's adding something more to it as opposed to feeling like you need to come up with your own idea for it. Do we have any thoughts from people online?
Yes, but had more of a negative tone to it. It felt like more negative overall.
Yeah.
From your mom.
From my mom. Well done, Mom. Right? Yeah, so yes and feels more positive, yes but feels more negative, right? So yes and is an incredibly valuable mindset. It's a fundamental mindset of improvisation. If you take an improv class, you will learn yes and. But it's also a great way to always be able to continue the conversation and to have a positive, lasting experience, right? So in kind of a live conversation, if you never know what to say in the conversation, just yes and the last thing that the person just said. Just build off of whatever they said. Even something like, how about this weather? Right? Quintessential small talk, which I love talking about the weather, right? Not because I want to get to know people, I just love the weather. I think it's amazing. I don't know if you guys know this. I was reading an article, and there are 1,700 tornadoes in the United States every single year. 1,700. I read that, and I was blown away.
Let's see how people feel about that joke.
See, there's one. On a scale of 1 to 10, how did you feel about the tornado joke? Go ahead and feel free to put that one in there. It's super fun. But no, yes and, we can yes and a conversation about the weather. How do you feel, yes, how about this weather? Yes. And if you weren't at this event right now, how would you be spending, this beautiful day outside or this cold day outside? What are you watching on Netflix, right? You can take whatever that normal conversation was and build off of it to something more interesting. Right? It's how you can continue that conversation. The other thing is the yes and is a great kind of way to build a positive relationship with people, right? We talked about, as I shared online, that yes and feels more positive, right? Do you guys know anyone who is like lights up a room whenever they enter a room? Do you guys know someone like that? Yeah. I have a good friend of mine from high school, and you as well. Yeah, you've got a great smile walking in. A good friend of mine from high school, his nickname is Friday, because whenever he shows up, it feels like a Friday, right? It's great. Do you guys know those people who light up a room whenever they leave that room? Right? That's a real thing, right? They tend to be the negative people. They tend to be the people who always say yes, but. Right? If you're in a conversation all the time and they're like, just to play devil's advocate. It's like, why? No one asked you to do that. Right? Why do you got to bring us down? Right? So yes, but and yes, and as a mindset can change how the relationship feels. If we want to leave someone with a positive, lasting impression of us, probably helpful for us to do yes, and because it feels more positive, because it feels like we connected better. Right? So you can continue the conversation in the moment just by building off of whatever they've just said. We can also do it after the fact as well, right? To answer your question about how do we follow up with someone, is yes and whatever you've said in the conversation. Anything that's brought up, use that as an excuse to follow up with them on LinkedIn or email a little bit later. So for me, you can also even be intentional about this going in. Is like whenever I'm in conversation, I bring up comedy a lot. Like I bring up different comedians. And so if people are talking about different ideas, I'll be like, have you ever seen that bit by Eddie Izzard on this thing? It's great. It's Death Star Canteen. It's hilarious. If you haven't seen it, give me your email address and I'll send it to you. Right? So in that moment, I've just told the person that I'm going to follow up with them. And it's not to follow up to say, hey, give me a job or meet me for coffee or anything like that. It's just simply, here, give me your email address so I can send you something funny. So I can send you something that you're going to enjoy. And it's now following up with that person, yes-anding what we've already talked about after the experience. You can also do that kind of in a quote-unquote forced way. If you think about the topics that you have talked about with that person, get into a more interesting conversation. If you want to follow up with them, you can say, I just read this, or I just saw this article on this topic that we're talking about I thought you might be interested in. Now, I just saw this article might mean I Googled articles about that topic we talked about so that you can find it to send to them, but it then creates a little bit more of an organic and more interesting follow-up than just give me a job. Or give me this thing that I want. Right? So we can yes and our way to continue the conversation. Great, so that's the 3-step process to networking. Ask compelling questions, tell interesting stories, continue the conversation. Now, because this is networking for introverts, I do want to talk a little bit about the emotions of networking, which is a little weird for me to talk about because I'm an engineer, so I don't really understand emotions fully. Right? But we have to understand the emotions that are involved with networking. So we have to understand, one, that it can feel intimidating. Right? People can feel a little anxious about the process, that they're standing in front of a bunch of people that they don't know. And so one of the things that we can do to get around that, again, is having a strategy in place and recognizing that humans aren't as scary as we think that they are. Right? Especially in a networking conversation, most people tend to try to be kind. If someone is at a networking event, they want to network. Right? No one's going to a networking event because this is going to be a great place for me to check email. That's what we end up doing on our phone because it's awkward, but they actually want to chat with people. They're there for that particular reason. So we can think of it in a way that's not quite as intimidating. There's also the people who are shy, right? Who are a little bit nervous. I love this picture because it's like a shy giraffe hiding behind the tree, right? And so we can kind of impact that ourselves based on our body language. In fact, everyone stand up. You can also do this at home if you would like. You're more than welcome to stand up. But stand confidently. Stand kind of in a confident pose. I can't do it completely, right? So how do we know if someone is confident? How do we know?
Shoulders spread, chin up.
Yeah, right? So their body language. So their shoulders are back and their head is up. How else do we know?
They're looking around. They're not in their phone. They're looking around.
So they're looking around. They're making eye contact with people, right? They're not, distracted by their phone or by something else. Anything else? Let me ask, can you ever truly know if someone is confident?
I can't. I'm pretty perceptive.
You think you can perceive it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think I
It's
can.
easier to know if they're not confident.
Yeah, there's certain things that we associate with non-confidence,
Yeah.
right? But the reality is you can never really know, right? Because you can't see what people are thinking, right? You guys can go ahead and have a seat. Right? You can't see, you don't know what people are thinking. And so, yes, if someone appears confident, we assume that they are confident. But again, we can't see in their head, right? And so there's the reason why this is important because a couple of things. One, because there's research that suggests that how we stand affects how we feel. Right? There's a great TED Talk by Amy Cuddy on the power of body language. Now, we can't replicate all of her studies that she's done, so we don't know the exact hormone changes or anything like that, but we do know that how we stand affects how we feel. So if we're going into a networking event and we're just nervous and all we do is act nervous, then that just tells the body, hey, we're nervous right now, send all the blood to the core, make it feel like I shouldn't have eaten anything earlier, right? Then we're just going to feel nervous. Versus even if we're nervous because we're going to a networking event, we don't know anyone, or we're going to give a presentation, or we're going to do an interview, whatever it happens to be, even if we're nervous and freaking out up here, we force ourselves to like stop, take a deep breath, stand confidently. We start to change our perception. Our body's like, oh, this is how we stand when we're confident. We must be confident right now. So you start to change your mood a little bit. But the other thing is that people can't see what you're thinking. Right? It's kind of like the duck metaphor. If you guys know the duck metaphor, like on the surface of a lake, a duck looks very calm, but underneath it, it's going crazy. Right? Same thing with confidence. I could be freaking out up here, but if I have my shoulders back, if I'm making eye contact with people, then the only thing people can see is, oh, that person must be confident. Right? So if we're in a networking event, even if we're nervous, if we stop, hold a more confident pose, people will then be like, oh, okay, that person is confident. We start to change it so that we don't feel as shy. The other thing you can do kind of around shyness is you can follow like Mel Robbins' 5-second rule of like once you get to a networking event, count down from 5, and then as soon as you get to 1, be like, all right, I'm going to go and talk to someone. Like don't give your brain long enough to kind of be in your phone and be like, who should I talk to? I don't know. That's going to be awkward, right? Just get into it immediately. All right? Cool. And then the last thing is the emotions of networking of recharging. Understanding that as introverts, right, nothing to do with social ability, but we do need time on our own to recharge. So that means if you're going into a networking event or going to a situation where you're going to have a conversation with a lot of people, helpful to make sure that you have some time before and particularly after to recharge from that event. Find ways to say, not necessarily stack a bunch of meetings on top of each other, a bunch of networking events, but to say, oh, okay, once I do this thing, I'm going to need a little bit of time on my own, right? I'm going to have to like play 2 dots, or I played 2 dots on my phone way too much. It's my Candy Crush, or get on Reddit, or just go for a walk, or read a book, or whatever it is, right? Have that planned time afterwards to be able to recharge your battery, so that you don't get drained out, so that you don't hate the experience too much. The other thing that you can do to kind of help the process is gamify the process. So even as a speaker, even someone who has done this a lot, I still have to kind of trick myself into networking. Once I get to a networking event, a lot of times I'm like, I just want to be somewhere else. And so I give myself the rule of like, I have to talk to 3 people before I'm allowed to leave. 3 new people. Even if it's just a short conversation. Hey, how are you? Great. All right, next person. Right? But I have to talk to at least 3 people before I can leave. And usually what happens is by the time I get into the first or second or third conversation, I start to warm up. They maybe introduce me to other people when I feel more connected, so I don't actually leave because I've actually like warmed up to it. It's just getting past that initial kind of inertia to get started. There have been times, though, I've talked to 3 people in like 3 minutes and then left. Right? So it's following my own rules of talk to at least 3 people to get things started, to manage those emotions around it. So the other question that comes up a lot with people is who do you actually talk to? If you're at a networking event or at some time, who do you actually talk to? Well, one, you want to create a plan beforehand of the important people. Like if there's important people that you want to talk to specifically, you can create a plan, know who's going to be at the event first, talk to them. If you're going to talk to the speaker, usually it's more helpful to, if they're like, as long as they're open and available, talk to the speaker before the event. Because then after event, everyone's going to kind of swarm them all at once. So if you want to have better conversations more before the event. But if there's someone that's like in their notes, then don't bother them. But the other thing is, how do you actually get into a conversation? So can I get 4 of you up here just to kind of demonstrate visually something? Great, yeah, we can get more. Great, and go ahead and stand in a circle. Stand in a circle. Yeah, full circle, right? So if we're at a networking event and you're wondering who it is that you should talk to, if there's a group that's fully, you can even get a little bit tighter. Yeah, I don't know if you'd be like that at a networking event, but if there's a group like this at a networking event, maybe don't join it, right? Something weird's going on, but it's also pretty closed off, right? And so it's kind of then awkward if I come over the shoulder to like, hey guys, like you're like, we're doing a seance over here, get out of here, right? Versus, okay, now open up into like a half circle. A little bit more, yeah, so it's a little bit more like that. So this is now more open at a networking event, kind of more natural for me to come up and kind of join this conversation, right? So you can do it kind of based off of body language of other people. One thing to recognize as someone at a networking event as well, or at a party or that kind of thing, is open yourself up a little bit more if you want to be willing to invite other people into it. Right? Because it kind of is telling us whether or not I can come into it. And getting into a conversation doesn't have to be anything, it doesn't have to be rocket science of anything. It can just be like, coming over like, hey, you guys look like you're having fun. Can I join you? Or if they're laughing, right, you can kind of say that. Or, oh, what did you guys think of the speaker earlier? Right? Or what brings you to this event? Whatever it is that you want, it can be just kind of a very simple question getting into it that's more open. The other thing is let's say they're a group over there. You guys are a group over here. There's someone here. You're just standing here. So Tracy is standing here. The other thing is that people, again, go to a networking event to want to talk to people at that networking event. That's the reason why they're there. So if you see someone standing off on their own, you can kind of come up to them and be like the person to kind of introduce that conversation, right? To be like, oh, hey, how are things going? How are you enjoying the event so far? What's one thing that you learned, whatever it is, right? So finding other individuals is another great person to kind of talk to at a networking event. Next thing is let's create a circle. Again, kind of we're all chatting. Yeah, we can open it up a little bit. I'll just kind of stand here so you can kind of see me. The other question that people have sometimes is how do you get out of a conversation? Right? Sometimes you've been chatting with people a little while and either they're very boring or you just want to talk to someone else or you got to go, whatever it is. How do you actually get out of a conversation? So there's a couple of things that you can do. One tip that people have told me while you have that drink in your left hand is to always keep that drink at about halfway. Because if a drink is always at about half full, at any given time you can continue to kind of drink from it, but anytime you then want to get out of the conversation, you say, take a bigger drink and be like, all right, I'll go get another drink. All right, an excuse to then leave and go and talk to someone else. You can also do things, of course, you can go to the bathroom or, oh, hey, I just saw a friend of mine, I want to go and see them, I need to say hello to that person. Or you can even say, hey, I want to try to meet as many people as I can while I'm here, so I'm going to go chat with a few other people as well. The key to getting out of a conversation is whatever you say, if you're like, oh, I really got to go to the bathroom, so it was great chatting with you guys, I'll see you later, is to actually go and do that thing. If it's like, hey, I got to go to the bathroom, and then I immediately walk over here and talk to more people, then it's like, okay, clearly he was just trying to leave, right? So you want to go and do the thing that you say that you're actually going to go ahead and do. Excellent, you guys can go ahead and have a seat. Thank you for helping me demonstrate that visually. Great, so that's getting into and out of the conversation. And the biggest tip that I've ever learned for a networking event is to pretend like you are the host. Pretend like you're the host of that party or that event, whether or not, even if you don't know the organizers at all, but keep that as the mentality. So if you see someone who's kind of standard awkwardly by themselves, go up and talk to them. If you talk with someone and you're like, oh my God, that's fascinating, you should meet so-and-so, someone else that you've met earlier, be that person that connects them. Be like, hey, Dan, you should totally talk to Fred. You guys connect over this thing, this idea, right? Be that host, even if you don't know the organizers or not. It's a great kind of mentality to be in. It also, at least for me, is almost a trick in my head where it's like, if I'm there just kind of as myself, then it feels a little bit awkward to get into conversations, that kind of thing. It's a little weird. If I'm the host, if I'm acting as a host, then it's like, oh, that's kind of a role that I'm playing. That's a persona that I'm playing. So it's not my awkwardness that I'm worried about. It's more, what would I do as a host? What would I say? And can kind of get me into almost a character for that networking event that makes it a little bit easier. So start to wrap up. We're going to talk a little bit about a recap, and then we're going to go to questions, both kind of in the room and at home. So I want you to start to think about what questions you still have around networking or any of the things that we've talked about. And at home, you can start to type those in. Because what we've talked about so far is we've said that introversion has nothing to do with social ability. Right? It's simply how you think and how you recharge. And that networking or conversation is simply a skill, and it means it can be learned. The skill or the process that we talked about is to, 1, ask compelling questions, 2, tell interesting stories, and 3, continue the conversation. In the process, you can manage the energy, host the party, and find ways to make it more fun for yourself. Gamify the process, find ways to make it more interesting, whether that is doing that first letter, last letter exercise, or making sure that you find ways to talk about different subjects. I often bring up milkshakes or ice cream when I'm at networking events because I want to learn from other people where there are good places for milkshakes and ice cream. And so that's fun for me because I get new places to try out. So find ways to have fun. So we can start to get questions from those online about networking, what they would still like to know. Do we have any questions in the room of anything that you still kind of want to know or are curious about from the networking perspective or conversation? Yeah.
I would just say kind of like the aspect of like approachability. I get like at networking events, you should be approachable just because people are there to meet other people. But like, what would you recommend on how to give off that like you're welcome to kind of come approach?
Yeah, that's a great question. So how do you show that you are approachable or welcome to conversation at a networking event? I think a lot of it's in body language, right? It's being open, right? If you're closed off, whether your arms are crossed, even if it's cold in the room, people don't know whether this is because you're cold or because you're like being defensive right now or you don't want people to talk to you. So open body language. Also, not being in your phone. If you're in your phone. Also, don't have headphones in. If you have headphones in and listening on your phone, they're probably like, that person's doing something, right? But no, if you're more open, maybe looking around, making eye contact with people, and in a group of people, that's where if you notice you're in a group of people and it's completely closed off, you'd be like, oh, we can invite other people. I'm just going to take a slight step back and open my body language a little bit. That will say, oh, okay, this gives people an opportunity to be able to come in. Other questions? Yeah.
When it comes to storytelling, sometimes I notice that if I tell a story, the other person feel compelled to tell a more interesting story. Or it works for me as well. Are there situations where you avoid telling an interesting story? It's like,
yeah, so are there times you would avoid telling an interesting story? Yeah, because it is an interesting thing, right? And this was something that took me a little while to learn myself. Actually, I was in a Ask Reddit thread of what do you do that you didn't realize made you look like a jerk? Yeah. And someone was saying, oh, whenever someone would tell a story, I'd always add my own story on top of it. And what people told me is that it made it seem like I was always trying to one-up someone. Yeah. And so how do you relate to someone without like appearing that you're trying to one-up someone? And I think part of it is when someone is telling a story, getting engaged in that story and asking them about that story. Oh, so what happened? How did you feel? What happened next? Asking them, keeping them engaged. And then once they're completely done telling the story, to potentially tell your own, right? To be like, oh, that's super cool. That sounds like an amazing trip to Madrid. When I went to Madrid, this thing kind of happened. And maybe keeping it a little bit shorter, not trying to show that it was a cooler experience, but just trying to relate to it a little bit more. I think is part of it. I think, when you tell a story, people are going to be compelled to tell their own story as well. And I think the more you can show that interest in them, the more they're going to make a better connection with you, right? Because again, it goes back to really listening. The key to being a good conversationalist is to listen. Like Dale Carnegie says that you will make more friends in a week by being interested in people than you will in an entire year trying to be interesting. So when people feel like they've been listened to and that you've been chatting with them and working with them, that's when they really feel that sense of connection. And that's the goal kind of within networking, right? It's not to show, hey, this is all how cool I am, but more to be like, oh, this is how cool you are. Does that help? Yeah.
As far as networking, would you suggest sticking to what you know or stepping out of your comfort zone? I mean, as far as interacting with your own demographic or stepping out of the box and trying to get to know another culture or group of people that you aren't familiar with, which in a way can be kind of difficult and uncomfortable, but...
It can, yeah. So do you stick more to kind of culture or comfort levels or branch out? I think part of it depends on your goal for networking, right? That particular event, what is the goal, and who are the people in those groups. But I'm all for experiencing new cultures. I think it's a fantastic thing to do. I think that's one of the biggest benefits of travel is that you get exposed to new cultures and things that you wouldn't normally learn otherwise. And that's when you get to have really cool experiences. So the experience of, like, for me, going to Norway or some of these other places when I've traveled, it's because I've been willing to put myself into those situations. And so I think you absolutely should. And I think when you go in with kind of a listener's mindset or a learner's mindset, I'm not making assumptions about this culture, I just want to learn. Tell me about this, I would love to learn more. What do you love about that? Where you ask more interesting questions about, hey, this culture that I'm not familiar with, or I'm traveling to this place, like, oh, cool, like, I'm here in Prague. What's your, like, favorite underground Prague thing to do that I wouldn't find on TripAdvisor? Teach me about that culture. What is that like, right? And then you're going to find something a little bit more interesting than what you might otherwise. So if you put the kind of, like, again, make the other person seem like an expert or seem like, oh, wow, high status, really cool, they'll start to then open up to you, I think. So I think seeking that culture is big. Do you have any questions from the virtual audience?
I'm actually sorry, Drew. I have to go get another drink, so I'm kidding. You talked a little bit about how to become more noticeable so that people will want to choose you as the person to come speak up. Maybe you could follow up on that a little bit. And then a follow-up question is then how to continue that relationship. So to make more active friends potentially with someone so that they continue to start conversations with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, yeah, again, the body language is a big thing to follow up with. I will also say, this is a kind of a personal side, is to get people really to come up to you. This is why I prefer to speak at any networking events that I'm going to. If I just go as an attendee, it's a little bit harder. That's when I'm more in my head. But if I go and I speak, then it's a lot easier for me as an introvert because I've then spoken, people have seen me, and then people will come up to me and be like, oh, I liked what you talked about this, or I like this image, or this kind of thing. So for me, that's a known personal strategy, is try to be involved in the event somehow. But whether you're speaking or not, another thing can work is like volunteer to check people in or volunteer to help with the event in some way. Then you become part of the event itself, and you kind of have an excuse to talk with people, and people kind of see you as someone that they can go up and talk to. So then the second question was
how to make more active friends or networking connections, both online and in real life, so that they continue the conversation.
Yeah. So the initial conversation, this 3-step process is just the beginning, right? It's just how we go from the acquaintance phase or from the complete stranger phase into kind of the acquaintance phase. And if you think about, there's 5 stages of relationships. So it's acquaintance, build, continue, deteriorate, and end. Are the 5 stages of any relationship. So the acquaintance is getting to know someone. Build is you get to know them a little bit better and building a stronger relationship. Continue is like where it's continuing at a high level. And then all relationships may start to deteriorate a little bit, where someone that you haven't talked with in a long time. And then all relationships end, right? Whether they end because of distance, because you move to a different job or something else, or it ends because someone passes away, whatever it is, right? All relationships will end. So it's always that stage. And so knowing that this is the acquaintance phase of getting us started, and then the follow-up through shared experiences and shared interests is how you build that relationship with people. So if you meet someone at a networking event, that's where you have that follow-up email, and it's like, hey, here's this funny video, this thing that I thought that you would enjoy. Or there is, then from that you can say, hey, I really enjoyed our conversation, would love to sit down for an informational meeting. Or I'm going to this event that you may like. And so then from there, it becomes about how do you continue to have communication with them? How do you continue to have conversations with them? And you can always kind of fall back on the same 3-step process, but you're going to kind of repeat that, and maybe the level of even platonic intimacy might be going up based on the experiences that you do over time. But people have become closer together when they have shared experiences and shared interest. So building and finding those things to build off of. Any other questions from?
Yeah, you mentioned earlier about the explanation. So Muslims curious about keeping them simple or laconic, if you will. Is that a rule? He was wondering, or does it depend on the particular person he's talking to?
What's simpler? Keeping what simpler?
Explanations.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, it obviously very much depends on who you're talking to, right? So the idea of conversation in the communication being relevant and relatable is based on the other person, right? So if you're talking about your job as a computer programmer and the other person like works in HR and doesn't really fully understand if there's a difference between, like, say, a software developer and a computer programmer, and like what Ruby on Rails is versus like C++, HTML. Like if they don't know any of those things, you're going to keep it high level. But if the person that you're talking to has been programming for the last 10 years and hires programs, all that kind of stuff, you're probably going to go into a deeper dive. Right? So it's all about what's relevant and relatable to that person. So it might be simpler or it might be more complex. for sure.
And all the, someone asked about the 50 questions. That'll be provided as part of the resources.
Absolutely, yeah.
Awesome.
So as we start to think about next steps, there will be provided a handout for those of you here, and then also as a follow-up to those online, and also a link to the resource of 50 questions to get to know someone, just as a kind of starting point to build that conversation. Great. So to actually start to build off of that close, if you want to, you can head to humourthatworks.com to find out more information about the organization, as well as additional trainings and things that we do. Some of the additional resources will be there. To kind of close this part of the story is to say that, yeah, as an introvert, I do very much need to recharge on my own. I do need that time away where I am, behind four walls that no one else is there with me. But conversations for me have led to some incredible experiences, right? That networking process of seeing things that you would not see otherwise, having opportunities that you would not otherwise have, and getting to hike and climb Prekestolen, the pulpit rock at the very beginning. And also not pictured in that picture was the guy who introduced me to that place. He went there hiking with me. He even gave me a Kit Kat bar to eat while at the top of it, which is pretty fantastic. So, certainly keep that in mind and think about how you can use these steps to have better conversations, whether it is at networking events, whether it's standing in line, at the grocery store. We live in New York, so that'd probably be weird if you became one of those people that talk to you in line. But if you go to like the Midwest, it's completely open, and now when people start to interact with you, you have a way to kind of be able to respond and engage. So I hope that you have learned a few things, have had a little bit of fun. I've been Andrew Tarvin. You guys have been great. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you all for joining us here live. We hope you enjoyed this at home. This is something that we are continuing to look at doing over and over again. So you will also get a link. We were going to post it in the comments, but I think it's not allowing a website. So that'll be a part of your email. You get all the resources Drew mentioned, including a handout, plus a link to a survey where we would love to hear your feedback about this presentation and what you liked and what you really liked. If you didn't like stuff, don't put it in the survey. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, we want your honest feedback. So again, thank you. Thank you to Andrew Tarvin. And yeah, let's give him a big round of applause.